Thanks for joining us for today's social system mapping on-ramp session for May 9th, 2022. I think it was the music earlier, took me back to earlier time. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra. I'm the co-founder of SumApp and Greater Than the Sum, and Kara Martner, who's our producer here and our tech support person. So welcome. So what this is, for those of you who are new to our community practice and our context. So this is, I'm just realizing I need to do one thing. Okay. This is essentially a vision about a possibility. So there's this kind of mapping that we call social system mapping that we refer to a lot. And we believe that this kind of mapping can help communities and change networks become self-organizing more quickly and more wisely, and can catalyze greater potential in all kinds of collective transformation initiatives. So at the highest level, what we're doing here today is we're sort of leaning into that possibility and working to turn that vision into a reality. It's also a learning opportunity. So this is an opportunity for you to learn about what this social system mapping is. And it's an opportunity to contribute your own experience, because we know that this is, I mean, there's a lot of theory that goes into social system mapping, but it's not just about theory, it's about lived experience with change and community. And so it's a community of practice, a learning community, and a community of field building, with essentially an intention for all of us who are part of this community of practice to become carriers of a culture of systemic transformation. So if there's anything about this community and social system mapping that appeals to you, we invite you to join us. And for this particular session, we are going to do what we call an on-ramp session, which is just a really basic introduction to social system mapping, and especially just through not talking about it, but just through someone in the community sharing a map that they've made. And so we're going to have Katy Mamen will be joining us and sharing a map that she has created. So for today's agenda, we're going to have you go ahead in a moment and just do chat, put introductions to yourself in the chat. In a minute, we'll look at Katy's map. We will open it, or Katy will walk us through her map. Then she'll open it up to questions and answers. And this is where just whatever you're curious about, just feel free to throw out and we'll deal with. And then at the time, so the formal session is scheduled for an hour. And at the top of the hour is when we'll have our formal close, and Katy will jump off, and anybody else who needs to jump off at the top of the hour, we'll pause and let you do that. But I will stick around, and probably some other members of the community will stick around for an extra half hour. So if you want to continue the conversation or have deeper questions, feel free to stick around after that, after we close for the half hour, or for that final informal half hour. So let's go ahead and have you put into the chat your name, pronoun, and location. Carol from Irvine, and Jackie from Milwaukee, Nilanka from Columbia, Katy from California, and Mary and Leah. Welcome to all of you. I'm so glad you could join us. And for those of you who are new, if you don't mind, another thing I'd love for you to add to your introduction is how you heard about this session, how you came to us, where you found us. Because Kara and I were just commenting on how we keep seeing new names and new faces all the time, and we don't actually do all that much marketing. And so it's kind of like, where are they coming from? This is wonderful. Leah, thank you. And Network Weavers. Oh, Michelle. Yeah, at Kumu. Cool. Okay, next. next chat intro piece is, what's one primary network that you are part of or working with? Most people who show up here have some kind of a change community or network that they have some kind of involvement with, whether it's professional as a staff person or personal as a network member. Just for instance, Brian has been working with the California Donut Economics Coalition, Childhood Vaccine Partnerships in rural North Carolina, EPIC Anti-Trafficking, Children in Nature, Adapt Chile NGO. Yeah, local adaptation to climate change. It's important. Okay, I'm gonna go full futures. It's a new one to me. Cool. So, and then just a quick, what brings you here today? What are you hoping to get out of today's session? Why are you here? Curtis wants to become an expert social system map. Yay.
Let's not wait.
Let's not wait. Is that what you said? I didn't hear you, Curtis. I heard part of it. That's Leah, I love your comment. There is definitely a sense of community here that is bigger than just social system mapping. It's sort of anchored by social system mapping, but it's really fun to sense it emerging. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide. And this is for those of you who are brand new to this and don't haven't not yet been introduced to the platforms. There's essentially two platforms that that are required to create a social system map. One looks kind of like this. This is SumMap. This is a data gathering platform. This is the piece that my spouse and I built together in order to create, to enable social system mapping. But so SumMap is the data gathering tool. It doesn't do much that's pretty or interactive or exciting, except for you go through SumMap. And so you, like, this is my instance, upload a photo of yourself and put in a little bit of brief, quick, short bio piece. Then there's a profile or survey in which you answer a bunch of questions. All of these questions are custom made for the context. So if you get a SumMap account and you're going to map a community, you will define the questions that go into the survey. You'll also define all of this text here. And then the connections tab is where you'll ask, you will also define questions here about a person, people's relationships to one another. So in this instance, this is my SumMap interface. So there's not possible to quantify my relationship to myself. So I can't click on that one, but I can click on every other tile for every member in the network and then answer questions about how I'm connected to that person. So if you were to go through here, you would see some of the people who are in this session are in here already. And then Kara, I think, will put a link to our maps, SumMap, so that if you'd like to be on our map, you can. But so this is basically the data gathering piece. So this is this right-hand setup part where the data gets gathered. And then this is a totally different platform. This is the Kumu platform. Kumu is a platform designed to visualize data in a graph format. So a graph basically means anything that has dots and lines. So Kumu likes to bounce around a lot, but if it's got dots or just words or rectangles, if it's got blobs and lines connecting the blobs, that's a graph. And that's the technical term for that. It's a graph. And Kumu is designed to create graph visualizations where you can filter on various dimensions. You can see information. So all of the data that gets, this is my instance again. So every answer that I put into the survey shows up here on my side panel, and every connection that I put on here, say my connection to Mercedes, is going to be visible in one of these lines. Well, we're not going to go that deep and try and find that, because we're going to look at Katy's map in just a moment. But so this essence is we gather the data in SumApp. The data flows live automatically once you've got it set up into Kumu. And then in Kumu, the visualization platform, you do the custom work of designing the filters, designing the views that you want to see, sizing it however you want to, just whatever you want to do with that data, however you want to represent that data to tell the story that you want to tell. You do that in Kumu. And then Kumu has a thing called an embed link. So we take that embed link and we plunk it right back into SumApp. So for your network members, they just have one interface to deal with, which is SumApp. And once the data is going into Kumu, Kumu has been designed the way you want it, you put it right back into SumApp, and essentially it's the same map, exact same map as in Kumu. It's just not in an editable state anymore. And it's in the same platform so that your community members don't have to deal with two different platforms bouncing around, et cetera. And they can just go ahead and see, like I could look on here and see, oh, I haven't connected to Kitty. I need to go to connect to Kitty. Go right to my connections, connect to Kitty, and move on. So that is essentially what's the technical interface between gathering the data from your network, getting it mapped, and then enabling your network to access the data as well. There are other ways of accessing the map. That's not the only way, but that's sort of just to be clear how the fundamental interface works. And that is enough from me. I'm going to go back to my presentation and introduce you to Katy Mamen, who's a principal of Water Bear Collaborative and has been a member, a wonderful presence in our community for a while. And she's going to share a map that she made with us for a community she's been working with. And I'm through sharing.
Thanks, Christine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll share, I think, for about 20 minutes, and then we can move into just conversation and questions. It's great to see everybody and be here. Good morning. And I'm just on my laptop today. I don't have an external monitor, but I'll try and track the chat. So feel free to put questions in there. I also just love the idea of using chat to amplify learning. So if there's something you're hearing that feels helpful that you want to remember and help each other remember, pop it in. And also just know there's so much experience in the room. So just encourage you to share your learning as it emerges, as it pops into your mind, to just add to what I'm sharing here. That would be great. So yeah, I'll be sharing a little bit today about the Social Gastronomy map. This is a map project from the Social Gastronomy movement, which is a network of networks. It's a global, and it connects organizations that use food for social change. So that's a very broad tent. And the Social Gastronomy movement is essentially a backbone for these organizations, supporting them and connecting them both in place and across the world. So it's an opportunity to link like-minded organizations that are working on similar tactics and that kind of thing. And it's also, they also provide support to networks in place. So in a city or in a region, you know, providing kind of collaboration and backbone services, supporting, you know, social innovation and hubs in different places. So it's a really great organization. And they're based in Brazil, and they got started out of a nonprofit called Gastromotiva, which is really doing wonderful work to feed folks and really connect food coming out of restaurants with people who need it. So I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen. And I'll just start by sharing a Social Gastronomy Movement's website. This is our webpage about the map. And in this map project, there are 2 versions of the map that are both using the same data from SumApp. One is public facing and one is private, which has a lot more detail and enables people to share with each other in the network. But in the questionnaire in SumApp, they're asked, what do you want to be on the public map? And those who say yes will automatically populate into this map, which is the public version. And that's embedded right into the website. So it's introduced, there's the website there, and then people are encouraged to become a member of the Social Gastronomy Movement in order to access the more detailed map. And that's a really nice technique that I think's worked really well in this case. And then it just walks you through if you do become a member and you have access to the member map, then you can have more detailed profiles of members. You can, learn much more about organizations. You can see the connections among people and, build relationships, and they really support people in doing that. You can filter and find others with similar interests. And then there's a skill sharing. So I think many of you here have maps with these kind of, skill sharing. So what are skills or capacities that you have that you're willing to share with others in the network? And then what do you need support with? And that's a great way to do asset mapping across a network and see also, like as a backbone or as a network weaver or holder, it's a really easy and great way to see where is the network strong and where does it have a lot of skills and where does it, have a lot of areas where not a lot of people have the skills, and then you can step in to, bring in educational opportunities or support. So I really like that feature a lot. So that's the website. And again, one thing I really love about Kumu is open source. So I don't know if you can do it in this embed. Oh yeah. So if you click on a map and press T or go to the code, you can access all the code. And that's really great. If you see something in a map that you like, you can kind of copy and paste the code and use it. So that's just a little tip that I find really helpful. But I also would say, I think it's a good practice not to like make maps that look exactly like other people's maps. So maybe, customizing a little bit. And in this case, we actually used the colors of the organization's logo in the map to just create more harmony. So that's really nice feature. All right, so I'm going to move on to share a few map views. So this is the public map view. This is the public map. So this has less of the detailed information about members. And the one that's on the site is the geo network, but this is a network map view. So obviously you can see connections among people. There are these, I love just the kind of creative patterns that form in these maps, with the connections, like, oh, there's this whole tail going out here, like it's a little string. And as, I feel like as I've gotten more sophisticated in learning about social network analysis and, reading into these forms and making meaning out of them, it's been really helpful. And I really like to kind of interpret maps and, build inferences about what it's telling me about a network, and then bring that into the room with a network and say, like, is this right? Does this reflect your experience? And it can help really deepen conversation. So just a basic walkthrough for those who are new. There's this overview pane, which you can put in photos, videos. You can embed a whole lot of stuff in here. But this is an introductory one, and you can click here for map navigation tips. That's a nice feature. You can kind of create a JPEG of instructions that you can link to. And then in this case, we did an orientation video. And, some people, I think in any network, it's true that some people will be really drawn to these maps and dig into them. And for some, it'll be super overwhelming. And so I really like to build in as much quick orientation. And Jennifer asks, is this designed as a dual element map, meaning can it reflect individuals and organizations? And the answer is no. This is designed, and that's actually been one of the challenges here, because it's really by individual, and each organization has like a formal representative to the network. So it's worked well in that sense. But what we do is sometimes replace the label. Sometimes we'll have the individual be the label, and sometimes we'll have it be the organization. So it's a bit of a proxy, and it's a little bit imperfect, but it's a lot more, that's how it was designed, and it's more straightforward. So, yeah, I was just saying that it's nice to build in wherever you can orientation, and also, you know, in networks, like when you're doing any kind of Zoom call or, you know, a meeting, the more you can socialize the map, like bring it up, use it. You know, if you're introducing a speaker, click on their profile and, you know, talk. You can kind of scroll through and just get people used to, like, what is it I'm looking at and how does it work? So this one, that's the overview pane. And so you can zoom in and zoom out and zoom to fit. There's a legend that in this case talks about different roles in the network. There are connection types, so we can filter, and these are all customizable. So if we want to filter people who have come to actively work with this person through this particular network, it's going to be much fewer, but it's a really great way to see what impact the network's had in forming relationships. So you can see in this case, there's quite a lot of new relationships, new working relationships that have been formed through the network. So that's really fun. And then, so in this case, we've also built these filters like that one, or, you know, being able to find people in the network according to these different attributes. And this is, you know, just a great way to use SumApp, or have members of the network use SumApp. So it's like, I think of it as a super directory. So you can have like long lists or spreadsheets of people and their attributes, but it's hard to navigate. And here you can, for example, you know, find people in the network who are working on different aspects. So nutrition and food education, right? It'll filter and show everybody in the network who's working on nutrition and food education, and also see the relationships of networks. So I also like to kind of filter through and look at and go to each one individually and take a snapshot and then look at them side by side. And so you might see, oh, like people working in nutrition are really well connected, but in our network, people working on food policy, there aren't a lot of connections. So that may be a place we want to nurture more connectivity. And then, yeah, just to see, again, like when you get more into social network analysis, it tells you a lot about the health of the network and how people are connected, but we're not going to go too much into that right now. And also here we can filter by sector. So, you know, looking at just the nonprofits in the network, or looking at just philanthropy in the network. So again, a nice way to get a kind of cross-sectional view of who's there. And then we can also, in this network, look at who's being served by these organizations. So if you wanted to pull people together who are working with prisons, you know, we could do that here. And we see, oh, you know, there's a number of them, but they're not super well connected with each other. So again, wow, what a great opportunity to, why don't we, you know, throw together a Zoom call and bring everyone together and have them introduce themselves and learn from each other, because this is a learning network. So nice feature there. All right, so that's the basics on this view. And I want to just share a few of the, without kind of, you know, going into, you know, the privacy considerations, but I want to show you some of the patterns. All right, so a request to click on the organization item in the legend so we can see what it looks like. So this is just, I'm not sure I understand the question, but it's just showing with the circles around. It gives you a bit of a visual on the different roles. And actually in this case, this is an old view. And so the organization, the network doesn't have these particular roles anymore in the survey. So it's showing up as a lot of pink, a lot of social gastronomy organizations.
Katie?
Yeah.
I think that question had to do with, because it said, is that clickable? And the legend itself is not clickable. It's just purely text and visual. But Katie could have also put a filter at the top, just like she has of the other things, on any of the dimensions in the map. So it could have, you could filter on those legend items using filters from the top. So it's all about what you want to design as a first view and as a how to parse things visually in this context versus that context. But no, the legend isn't clickable.
Yeah, thanks. And just to show, if you do click on an element, you can obviously, this is one of the staff of, or formerly one of the staff of the social gastronomy movement. So just, you can see, the basic information, and whatever shows up here in the profile is drawn from some app, and you can filter, so you can only have only something show. So I like to use the SumApp questionnaire for both attributes that will go into the profile, but also evaluation, like how's it going in the network, or what would you like to see happen? So questions that won't show up here, you can still ask, and that's a nice feature of it. So you can hide some of the attributes. All right, so just to show a few more things. So this is the network version. So if you become a member, this is the version that you have access to. And I'll show a few of them. Again, it has navigation tips, and then it has a list of different views that you can access. So you can do Skillshare. What we're looking at here is members who are working on specific sustainable development goals. So we can click on one of them and focus and see, and this is one of the cases where the individual's name is replaced in label with their organization. And so you can see, all the organizations in the network that are working, in this case, on quality education. So that's, again, as a network organizer, you can use as a tool to help organize communities. Or if you're doing a conference, you can, do sessions organized by these, or invite certain people, or just get an idea, better understanding of the network. So that's sustainable development goals. And for those of you who are new to Kumu, there's this focus feature, which is really nice. So I just had clicked on one of the goals and then focused it, and it shows you elements one order of magnitude out. So if I expand the focus, I'll get 2 out. So I'll see not just people who are working on clean water, but also people who are working on clean water and one other sustainable development goal. And what's really nice too is in this one we did a hover over, so the pop-ups. So you can kind of just, again, if you pick one issue, you can kind of hover over it, and this is all, again, customizable, the pop-ups.
Great. Katie,
yeah.
Can I suggest, can you tell them, how did you get those square nodes for the SDGs?
Yeah, so aren't they pretty, Christine? Yeah, so usually in Kumu, in the code, this is all clustered by sustainable development goal. So the lines no longer represent relationships between people, but relationships to the sustainable development goals. And then for each one, so to go through in the code, and for each one, replace it with a URL for that image. So what that looks like is this. Have to go down here. So for each one, so goal 3, there's the code block, and then there's a URL for that particular one. So it's a little bit more labor intensive, but it makes it easier if you're listening to music like Christine was playing at the beginning of this.
How do you know who's related, who's connected to each goal?
That was a question in the questionnaire in SumApp. Right? So it says, which of these sustainable development goals are you actively working on? And people check them. And then again, I think it's a cluster. So that's all the upper. So yeah, so it's clustered according to Sustainable Development Goals.
So I'm just asking, because that's a thing that people will often say, I'm looking, like I want to show people's relationship to a thing or an idea or something that isn't another person.
Yeah.
And if it's in the survey, then you can do what's called clustering on that thing. So that's, if you want to, you can, and by clustering, you're basically making an element or a node of each item of the list. And then as people selected it, they're connected to it. So it's just a little bit of thinking about how to get at what you're trying to represent. And everything doesn't have to be a specially defined mode in a different sheet. It can just be a checkbox list in the main survey for the people.
Yeah, and I would say too, Christine, when I first started, it was, you have to structure your data in a particular way sometimes to get the outcome you want. And so I highly recommend playing around with it if you can. So before you go live, sharing a survey with a group, do a few dummy profiles or get a core group of close people, your beta testers, to fill out the survey info and give you feedback on it, but then build the map before you go live and make sure it's working, make sure your questionnaire is structured in the right way. And I will say too, someone had mentioned earlier not being that comfortable with code, and this is, I'm not a coder, but I kind of figured it out along the way. But there is this basic editor. So once you link, through this button down here, link your SumApp JSON link into Kumu, it's a pretty easy, I usually do more options to figure this out. And for me, I also would say it was really helpful. Like the first time I did a project, it took forever to figure everything out in Kumu. And, at one point I got like an hour or two of consulting help. So in that case, Kumu has consultants that will, are happy to provide those services, and there are others. And they have a great Slack channel, and so does SumApp. Like SumApp's actually such a, like Christine said, is a really wonderful community of people who help each other out. So I've really appreciated over the last few years getting to connect with this community and figure this all out together. So that's this view. And just to show a couple of other views that are clustered. This is a view of the network clustered by country. And I don't want to zoom in too much because, it's just part of the, internal network. Although I think all of this info is also part of the public map, but you can cluster and see the geographic distribution by country. And again, like help foster connections by country and that kind of thing. We also did it by languages. So you can see here the predominant languages are English, French, and Spanish. But there are a lot of other languages represented in this network, which is pretty amazing. And I think, one of the things that was a limitation for this network, and I think is true a lot in this kind of technology, is the language barriers. Like Kumu and SumApp are all only English, right? And so when you're trying to foster multiculturalism, it's a little bit unfortunate, although you will see some people have their profiles in different languages, which is great, and that's encouraged. And there's a question in the chat, if anyone has recommendations for live or virtual coding classes, please go ahead and put that in there. I don't. And then the last view I just wanted to show before we move to questions is the social network analysis. So again, one of the great things with SumApp is it allows you to capture all of these relationships, and it's been really great and fun to work with that. And so this is a map view showing, sizing by, so the bigger the person is, the more incoming connections they have. So it really shows who's most influential in the network. And again, I'm not going to zoom in too much on this one, but just to show that there are these different sizes. And it's not that everybody in the middle is necessarily the biggest. And so there's something about this, I like to think of it as a gravitational force. So people in the center of these maps and Christine, you may have a better way of explaining this, but they have more shared connections with each other. It's not just that they have the most number of connections. So you see a couple of people out here who are a bit more in the periphery have a pretty high number of incoming connections, but they have a lot more connections with people on the periphery who don't have a lot of shared connections, if that makes sense. Christine, did you want to add to that with maybe?
I think you did a pretty good job, but just looking at your pattern, it's interesting. Like the people at the very middle are smaller than like at the edge of that core of that core cluster. It's the people around the edges that are actually bigger, and that's partly because they're partly being pulled out to the edge because of their connections on the periphery. So there is definitely a gravitational dynamic going on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to stop there and just share a couple of other things, but yeah, so just in terms of lessons learned, I think I shared some of them, but just a couple others that feel important to me, and at least in this moment, are I think it's super helpful if you're doing a first map to be really clear about what it is you want to visualize. What are your objectives? What do you want to show? Because I think if you're not clear, it can be really overwhelming. There's so much you can do with it. And you want to make sure you're designing it to do what you want it to do. And, in the spirit of participatory networks, I also really like to work with network members. Like, what do you want to know about each other? What do you want to show? And then build maps around that, rather than kind of guessing or, but sometimes too, as a network weaver holder, if you're managing a network, you need information. So there are different audiences. So you might have certain needs from the map, and your members might have certain other needs. So getting clear about the different audiences and what the different needs are is really helpful. And one thing I'll say too, like in Kumu, the geographic map feature is a little glitchy. So if you go to the socialgastronomy.org/map page, sometimes it won't fully load because it's fetching the data for the map while it's loading the map. And if if you're on a slow connection and the map loads first before all the data is fetched, you just get this like blue ocean. And that really it's just a particularity, and, worked with Kumu a lot to try and resolve it. And it's just unfortunate, but so you'll see in the top corner of the map, it says, if if it doesn't load correctly, press, this button. And that kind of irks me a little bit because I like everything to be perfect, but it seems to, it's not a huge problem. Yeah, I also just like this idea of being able to have a public view and a private view. And yeah, maybe I'll just stop there. We're at time, and we can just open up to conversation or questions or other insights that you have, or things that have worked well in your maps that you might want to share. So.
Thanks so much. You talked a little bit about how the members interface with the map. And I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit more, because that's sort of what I find is the real challenge. You talked about kind of like some people will engage more, and other people will feel really overwhelmed by it. But as a tool for self-organizing, how do you see that manifesting in your group?
Yeah, well, again, I think some people use it that way and others don't. And for me, it feels important not to rely on that as the only way that people connect and self-organize. Some ideas are you can have like a subgroup or a committee, or, a group of folks who are really interested in it, be kind of ambassadors of the map and help to support other people, and spread the love of supporting folks. Socializing it, again, like every way you can use it with people, even if you're in a one-on-one conversation, bring up the map, walk through it. The more people can get comfortable with it and have them be shown what the potential is for them, the better. And I think, again, in every communication, in every newsletter, every email, snapshots of the map or ideas about how you can use it. Hey, you want to find other people who work on river conservation? Here's how you do it. Encourage, like, take a minute, in the next week and find someone, you know, who you haven't connected with and connect with them.
I'd like to add a little bit to that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, Leah, I mean, I've been through, you know, lots of an evolution with this tool set and this methodology. And I think there was a moment in time when I and other people felt like this could become a collaboration platform, and it's not a collaboration platform. And I don't think it will ever be a collaboration platform. So if you're actually looking at, you know, shared work and tactics and moment-to-moment network communications, you're going to need another one or two platforms, such as Slack and something like we're testing Notion currently in our community practice, but some kind of collaboration tools, because it's not going to give you that. But I still say it can help with self-organizing, because what it can do is help us understand the whole better than any collaboration platform or like Facebook groups or any of those things. They don't help us see the patterns in the network. They don't help us identify the underlying, you know, the below the surface dynamics, which a social system map can help with. So it's more about deepening our insight into, I mean, it can be very much about developing relationships and who to reach out to and just being able to find people better. So that directory level is very useful. But at that collaboration level, it's not ever going to be the tool. But for deepening, which you can't get in another way, and getting wiser about how the network is a system and how systems work in it, you know, all together, it helps with that.
And if others have thoughts on Leah's question, go ahead and put them in the chat. Curtis, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, just Christine answered it to some extent there, but what I was wondering specifically is, as you're describing sort of this way of using it to interact with people or helping people to see it as a thing to interact with, do you normally have them use some app to make adjustments, or do they go straight through Kumu?
Yeah, I think definitely in my experiences, it's been through some app, and I'll just share my screen again for 1 sec. And that for me, that's other real benefit of some app is if you have a private network, you know, one way is that you can just share the embed link from Kumu, and but then that can get passed around more easily. But in some app, people have access to the map through this tab, and it's really a great tool. So in this particular network, and in a lot of networks that I've worked with, it's through some app, and they can find these different. You can kind of access these different you know, different views just by putting links to them in here. And I didn't show this view, but again, this is a really common one, like kind of an asset map of a network. So in this case, I designed it so that people who have the skill are green, people who don't have it are red. Oh no, people who offer the skill are in green, people who invite the skill are yellow or orange, and then people who both offer and invite the skill are purple. And that's always interesting, right? Like, because I think they're framed a bit broadly, so that people want some sub skills and offer some sub skills. But I really like the idea of then asking in the survey, you know, skills offered and invited, and give some categories, but then ask, well, more specifically, what is the skill you're offering or inviting? And then, you know, I built that into the hover over. If people have more specifics, then they can put them in there. And that's been really helpful too. But here, you know, you can take a quick look and see, wow, a lot of people want fundraising skills. Maybe we'll organize something around that, right? Whereas, I don't know, like, let's see, event planning. A lot of people have those skills, only a few want them. Maybe we're not going to focus our capacity building there.
I like what you did with that's a different way of doing offers and asks.
Yeah.
Often it's clustered. That's I'm going to contemplate that and play with that. And Curtis, I just wanted to add one quick thing, which is Kumu is read-only. So if it's getting its data set from some app, it can only get its data set from some app. So you can't have people go into Kumu and input data if you're using the live feed from some app.
Yeah, they can only go into some app and do it.
Yeah.
Which that's how they would have originally interfaced with it in the first place, right? So it would just be a continuation of their original experience.
Yeah, they're only going to some app. And I will say too, again, you really want to have your survey questions down, because if you add them later after you've launched the map, like it's impossible to get people to go back in and add one question, you know, or fill in one more question. It is hard to get people to go back to their surveys. So in this case, in the social gastronomy movement, it's built into the registration process. That's how you register. So everybody fills it out. It's really nice to, you know, require it. But it is challenging to ask people to go back. And so, yeah, again, building that in, like if you're having an event, you know, you could require people to register for the event through your Sum app survey by adding a question. And once they're back in it, you can invite them to update their info.
I'm gonna, impossible is too strong a word. And I think it depends, like there are contexts where I know people will, you know, annually they'll have people go back, and people, not everybody, but a lot of people will. And I'm sorry, my answering machine is not silenced. Stop that. Sorry about that. And I just want to take this opportunity to say that Mary and I and a couple other people in our community of practice are testing the theory of, so Sum app was designed so that if you do learn that there are questions that you didn't think, I mean, I think it is very valuable and important to get, you know, as clear on your questions up front as possible. But the whole idea was to make it iterative and make it so that you can continually add new members. And if you need to update because you discover, oh, there's a piece of the universe we never thought of, and now we've thought of it and we want to put it in there, that you can do that. So we designed it to be iterative, but Katie's absolutely right that in general, it's hard to get people to come back. And so there's a handful of us who are working on you know, like experimenting with a mini theory of change of how can we actually make this, get people to come back more. So watch for
you're really going to say that and then not tell us what the theory of change is? Because I won't be able to sleep for days.
No, it's not really a well-articulated theory of change. It's more about gathering input. So as people look at a map and we hear, it's more about making a way for people to share their thoughts, the changes they would make, the things, the ideas they have that we didn't ask, to have a harvesting place for that. And then to have a process, just a slow, gradual process of a handful of us going through them. And one of the important pieces of it, I think, is culling the questions that are juicy and meaningful and that define our reality that we need to get everybody's input on, and then having a conversation about that, rather than treating it like an administrative task, like, oh, we've got all these questions, we've got to wordsmith them, they've got to sound right, we've got to get through this checklist, but identify what are actually good, useful discussions that the community of practice could have. And so we did, and Mary has been putting in she has been the main sense maker and question sorter and cogitator on this whole thing. And but Mary identified that one of the questions that we had not asked in our community practice map had to do with how people wanted to show up in our community, the roles they wanted to play in our community. And so we started with Deepa Iyer's movement roles, and we did some work on that. And then we had a deep dive, which is a thing we do on the third Monday of every month. We assigned one of our deep dives to a conversation about the informal roles or the ways what people want to bring to this community. So are they a healer? Are they a listener? Are they a disruptor? Are they a coordinator? Are they a catalyzer? Are they all these things? We did a brainstorm on that. We refined it some more. We're working on now making a little narrative of how that worked. And then we'll share that with people, get more feedback, and then we'll blast it out. So it's sort of like turning the whole defining of a question into part of the social process and an event, a piece of community building.
Yeah. I also want to add that I think I want to emphasize too that you don't have to have the map be participatory. I mean, it's a great aspect of it, but a map can be super helpful just to you as a network organizer, right? To do some preliminary sense making. And I mentioned this earlier, I in one project brought kind of snapshots and inferences from the map into a meeting. And it was incredibly powerful to have that group do sense making in person. So they didn't even interact with the map at all, but just looked at the visuals. And some of them are so powerful. Like we did by racial identity and looked at the relationships in this field according to race. And it was really powerful because in this was a different project. In the center, everybody identified as white or Latinx. And then around the periphery, you see African American, Native American. And it was, it really sparked the most like robust conversation that I've seen in a long time in the room about that, right? So, and then to the question about, can you fill in answers on others' behalf? So in the Social Gastronomy project, I want to say that more recently, they decided they wanted to add country and to be able to cluster around country. And we asked address. So we had everybody's country information, but it's all just one entry. So we had to create another question with country. And we just did that manually just by going in the back end of SumApp. I think with a higher level of SumApp, you can download the data, manipulate it, and re-upload it. But this project doesn't have that level. And so we did it manually for, 150 people. So it just took a couple of hours of going into everybody's surveys and adding that. And I don't like to manipulate people's surveys at all. But in this case, we just did that by adding their country. Any other questions or thoughts people wanted to add?
I think what's bouncing around in my head in terms of what you were talking about, Christine, and it sounds like this is what you were saying, although you're speaking at a level that's a little beyond my cognitive experience at this point. What I'm trying to do is use social network mapping to illustrate the current status of the social network of an organization or a community and its growth, not necessarily for a purpose other than the connections. So like the map that you're talking about, Katie, the connections are about like creating this change. The work that I'm doing is creating change in a specific area, like water and food and things like that. Those issues are all secondary and tertiary to actually the building relational connections. And so what I'm thinking is that the change is possible based on the strength of the commitment that the core members have to the growth of the network, and then their capacity to influence the people that they have strong connections with. That my thinking is that that's where the capacity of the network, the people themselves to re-engage and keep it current, keep the map and the information current would come from. Does that sound like a pipe dream, Christine and Mary, or am I on the right track?
Sounds in alignment with the high. I mean, yes, that sounds not like a pipe dream. It sounds like a challenge. And it sounds like something that we don't have a lot of experience knowing precisely how to do. So figuring out how to make that a reality is sort of part of what we're grappling with collectively in this community at the core at the moment. But it doesn't sound impossible. It doesn't sound like a pipe dream at all. It just sounds like a new capacity and a new understanding that we're trying to develop together. And if we can, that would be like really cool.
Yeah, it sure would. I declare it possible.
I declare it possible too.
Well, with Katie's map, there were those people that were connected to the periphery, which was really wonderful. So you had a solid core, and you also had solid people that were connected to the periphery, which looked like a really healthy network to me. And one that would bring, you could not only influence out, but that brings innovation in, which is a question I had for you, Katy. With that sort of configuration, it sounds like an innovative network to begin with, but are the ideas from the periphery influencing the core, or what is that relationship?
That's a great question, and I don't have a detailed answer to that because I'm not part of the network.
Yeah,
I'm just helping with the map, but from what I understand, that is true.
Yeah,
to hear a bit more about that, and also just in terms of innovation, when so in this community and some app, one of the things we talk about is what are good questions to ask, and what does that lead to, and how do we support innovation in a network? And recently in one network, we did a how might we? And then, asking people, what is a question that's really on their minds and hearts? And it starts with how might we? And that was a great way to see like what is at the edge of that community's thinking, and then organizing learning opportunities around where the pattern is. All right, well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so I think we'll shift over into
we'll do our goodbye ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of you, we do this at the end, and I'm sorry some people had to jump off a few minutes early, but so first, just thank you so much, Katy. This is wonderful to have you sharing your map, and thank you, Curtis, for declaring possibility. I'm all about possibility, so yay. And Katy's gone, and but so I'm gonna, oh no, you're not gone, somebody's gone. So I'm gonna just count down 3, 2, well, first we'll all unmute our mics, and then I'm gonna count down 3, 2, 1. And when I get to 1, we just give each other our blessings and our love for the day and send each other off with good heart. So if you're gonna, and then if you wanna stick around, just do the blessings, of course, but then just don't hang up, don't check out. So if everyone wanna unmute, I'll go 3, ready, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
So have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you, Katy.
It sort of can backfire, because then they'll say, well, the map isn't really interesting. You could find this information. I've been there. There's a tension between keeping it simple, but interesting enough that it's showing something that doesn't exist elsewhere.
Sorry, there's a, I think there's a train.
You can hear it, it's not a problem. Jennifer, the other reason I think Mary's advice is really good is simply that's way less time consuming for you. So if you're trying to make your existing data conform to the needs of mapping, that takes up a lot of time. And I suggest only going there when you know you want everything else is falling into place, and when you know that is the best approach. But starting from that is really tedious and time consuming, and it's not going to get you to a better starting point or a better example. And it'll go much quicker and simpler if you just jump in and get, and it's just a matter of getting a handful of people to play with you. And sometimes, in some instances, that means me and Tim and Kara and our one client and their one person in their network go in and make 2 of each of us and pretend to be 2, and just have some dummy names, and we put in some data. We can play in that way, and then we've got something to show. And so it doesn't necessarily, but whoever you include up front, if you approach it not like, I want you to do this survey and this is going to be the foundation of the future and this is stable, then you're going to worry about it. But if you just sort of have it be like, okay, will you play this game with me? Will you do this sandbox thing? Will you test this out? We'll create a prototype and then we'll build on it. And so I'm going to get your creativity and your thoughts and just your tolerance. Then they know, okay, I might have to go in and do it again. I might have to make some changes, but it's kind of a setup for yourself to start with your data being too precious, because you might make changes that just in order to keep, and Tim and I have done this, like in order to keep one person's response, we'll spend an hour jumping through all these technical hoops. I'm exaggerating, but it's easier in the beginning to just say, and this might change. We might lose some, we might have to ask it from you. Just to hold it lightly, ask them as a favor, not as a research outcome.
Has there ever been a melding of this, like some app Kumu with appreciative inquiry? Is that practice been messed with?
A little bit at Mary's instigation in our map. I don't know that it's been like an official formal structure, framework for designing a map, but some of us bring that mindset and that inquiry into appreciativeness that has informed lots of maps in other places as well.
Yeah, it seems like what you're talking about, Jennifer, and the sort of the problem solution tension that you're describing, Christine, would be well served by coming at it with an appreciative question, and then going through the discovery process, letting that generate the energy, and in the design set of the appreciative inquiry process, that's where the what we want to see on the map comes from as part of the design, and then it's truly collaborative. Everybody has contributed to it and gets to sort of select where they fit in and all that kind of stuff. That would be it.
Yeah.
I just like the statement that the questions from appreciative inquiry, the questions create the world that you want. So
yeah,
I'm curious about that at the moment.
Yeah, that's a Peter Block thing too.
Yeah. And Curtis, you actually backed the process up a step before what I said, and your backing it up was appropriate. So not even what do we want to see in the map, what would we, but before that, what do we want this, what's our vision for this community is actually the starting point. An ideal starting point is what do we want this community to be? What do we want people to get from being part of this community? What do we want them to do together as part of getting to that vision of the community? So starting there and then taking it, certain parts design-wise get focused on in a different way, but then the parts that are mappable, we start to say, okay, and if we're going to map it, then what do we want to see? What would we need to see in order to get to that vision, in order to create the community that we're talking about? So
and that's the big obstacle, is because when you, in my experience, this is what I've been doing for the last 10-15 years, when you ask people with a blank slate, like who are you and what do you want the community to look like, they don't know how to answer except for as either a consumer or a producer. They can't imagine it. So trying to figure out I think that's why the storytelling part of appreciative inquiry, where you're not telling a story about like, how are we going to make a more create more low-income housing in our community. You're not asking a specific question. It's literally like, where have you experienced life in the most intense way? And start pulling. It's we don't ask that kind of stuff anymore, and people don't know how to talk about it. And they know their own stories about just actual being alive.
And that, I think I think what you're, what you're tapping into, sort of, Curtis, is, and what Mary and I especially have been thinking about, but you're framing it in a really cool way, is like, so when I first started doing mapping, people kept saying to me, you know, what do we do with the map? What can we do with the map? What will the map do? How do we use the map? What will the map give us? And I finally realized that's not the question. The question is what do we need to ask from them? Like, what are the, how can the map help us? I'm not saying it right, but what you're getting at is a practice that we don't do anywhere, not in relation to maps, but not in relation to anything else. And we can use a map, and we can use the development of a map to start to do that in all the little places. So like when Katie's saying, you know, what she calls socializing the map, right, bringing it up in all these various places is to start to think in that way and interact in that way so that we're always pointing to the questions and pointing to the connections and pointing to the dimensions that are important and how what we're learning and what we're discovering from our map. So it's just like that question set, like, how do we ask the questions and then what do we do with them is to me, the purpose of mapping is to have a tool.
And the question that I'm dealing with is the people around me don't even seem to see the need for a map.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really common.
Until they see it.
What's that?
Until they see it.
So that's why I was thinking if I could try to put up something that would catch their interest with the data that we have, and then say, well, what are all the different parts, more information that we would want about this? But then I also hear you guys saying, well, something more engaging. The question to bring a few people together who I might be able to interest in this. Who probably, there are a few people who see the importance of it, like maybe 2 people in my.
I did that, Jennifer, in a very rudimentary way, and it worked. I have a group of people in a community that I'm working with, 5 people, and I just asked them to give me lists of the people that they interact with the most frequently. And I went in and manually built a map. And then I showed them, you have, between the 5 of you, you have 79 people. And if we go out 3 degrees, we're talking 3,500 people that you have measurable influence with. And they were like, holy shit. Like, all of a sudden they had this realization that they had this power. And that started them it being more active with like their 10 or 15 people that they had given me names of, because they were seeing them as living connections instead of whatever it was they were thinking of them as before. And I think feeling that sense that like I am a part of this organism. And there it is. That's the thing that I love so much about the way network maps look, is they look like a living thing, especially when they get all squiggly and they're moving around. It looks like you're looking at a petri dish. And it just feels like, oh, there's life here that we can increase and generate, and we can be a cause in this, you know, messy looking thing it's a real illustration. It's an illustration of a real thing. Yeah, I think it's exciting.
Curtis, are you on our map? Have you the community of practice map?
I think I am. Am I?
Okay. I'll take a look.
He would have been put on, he would have added himself in the last 2 weeks, Mary, if he is. So it would be also that channel. And I don't think I've seen you put yourself on there yet.
Okay, I'll click this link up here in the chat. Join our community of practice social system map.
Now that I'm on the Zoom call with you, so then I put a generative, is it a generative connection that we have now? Or
if we've interacted in a way that feels generative for you,
okay,
any of us, then you can say that, yeah, because you're the judge of generativeness in your existence, and yeah, you can say how.
Well, my brain's, I'm going to have to do something physical after I get off this call.
You're saturated. Well, thanks, Brian, for showing up. And even though Brian shows up, Curtis, Brian shows up often and often just listens, but he's holds space and absorbing. But you also just sort of add a sort of a validation, and I always love to see you. So, and Mary as well.
Brian, what's your connection to some app, Kumu, this community?
I'm organized, Christine said, with the California Donut Economic Coalition. And the thing is that it's almost like completely different mindsets when I'm in this group and when I'm in that group. And I'm kind of like using the metaphor of spiders and ants. Here we're the spiders, we're building the webs. They're the ants, and they only focus on carrying whatever it is they're carrying and don't want to listen to anybody else. You just fit into whatever you're doing and don't worry about what the rest of everybody else is doing. Just do whatever is supposed to be being done. Build a nest, get the food, whatever it happens to be. And putting these together is a challenge, and it's something I'm constantly thinking about.
You sound like you're one of the 3 to 5% of the ants that wanders but is not lost.
Exactly. Okay? And I'm saying, hey guys, we could build these, we could go to the trees, we could do all this kind of cool stuff. I was saying, no, cut back underground and do what you're supposed to do.
Yes. If we could only increase the value, the known value of those 3 to 5%, the world would fix itself much quicker.
I think you're right about it. And the other thing is, I think that there's a lot of people out there who are trying to make change that think I can do this because I'm a good person and I've got good intentions.
And I'm smart.
It ain't going to work that way. But the other side of it is that especially with social systems mapping or any kind of visualization, it's actually a cognitive load you're putting on somebody. Mm-hmm. You're making them start thinking in a new way about different things when they're trying to just keep their organization going, and they don't want to put that much cognitive load into this. And you've got to make it easier for them. You've got to figure out some way to make it so that they don't have to take the load so much, or if they do, they see the value of doing it. And I don't think I'm there yet. So
I think that's the other thing. It's not necessary. It's not just making it easier. It's enough of emotional value that they're willing to do the work.
Exactly. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with trust. And I think establishing trust is another big thing about it.
Yeah. Brian, see, this is what happens once Brian gets talking. He always triggers something new in my mind. And what you just did, I think of like Sarah Shanahan talking about the RAMP network and how they had this up, their logo has this up thing, which is an increase in what? I don't remember. But then they realized, so they did this whole system thing and they realized they needed to increase something important for climate change. I don't remember what it was. But then they realized that there's also, they needed to decrease carbon. So they have this up arrow and this down arrow that go like that. And what you just did made me realize, oh, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, have enough, either make it easier and make it more valuable and increase their sense of, I've been talking about we have to make it valuable for a long time, but I just sort of realized those two go together.
Right. But you've said something in the past to me, which I think is really important, and is that you can make it easier, but you can't dumb it down. You can't deflate the complexity. People have to be comfortable with the complexity. If they're not, or they have to be put onto a certain platform that says, okay, fine, we're not going to give you all the complexity. We're just going to let you do what you want to do. But somebody has got to be dealing with the complexity, or we're not going to be able to make it in the future.
Yeah. But that's the piece where I realize the arrows go together, because I tend to ignore or reject the make it easier arrow. Yeah. Because for me, that's really hard. Like making it technically easier is really hard. But and also it's not my bent. I don't like dumbing down. I don't like premature simplicity before you've gone through the complexity. So I just sort of say, no, we have to make it more valuable. I'm always focused on the up arrow, but there's this down arrow that both have to be happening.
Yeah. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you guys go. I gotta go.
Okay,
off.
thanks for
Okay.
I've got to go too.
Thank you.
All.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Good to hang
Bye.
out.